Have you ever wondered what does it take to become a full-time dance teacher? And what are the struggles and the benefits of this lifestyle? Well, let's find out. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of ZoukNerds. In today's episode, we're going to be diving deep into our story and how we got to become full-time dancers, and what the struggles and the benefits that we found along the way, as well as how to make it better for you or the people that you want to support in the community. So, let's go! Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of ZoukNerds. Today we're here joining you with our co-hosts Gui Prada.
Hello people again.
And Adayl Iost.
Hello humans. Happy another week for us.
Awesome.
One more.
Exactly. So let's get into it. My name is Alisson, and today we're going to be talking about becoming a full-time dancer, which is something that we get asked so much from a lot of people in the community, whether they want to become a full-time dancer or just have some curiosity about the struggles, the fears, or also the benefits and the exciting parts. So let's talk about the beginnings and how, for example, Gui came from being a lawyer, having a full-time corporate job, into becoming a dance teacher. And myself, being a student and not really knowing much about what I would do in life at that moment. And also Adayl coming from multiple careers before in retail, event management, traveling to the US with a lot of people visiting Disney. And if you didn't know all of those things about us, today you're going to get into all the stories from the past. So my question here, I think from the three of us, the biggest shift was probably with Gui. So let's start with you, Gui. How did that go for you, and what were the fears and excitement of coming from a law firm and working with these big clients and big business into becoming a dance teacher where, a lot of the time we're just hoping that things are going to work out?
Yeah. No, that's super cool because even yesterday in class, one of our students looked a little bit down and I asked her, how was your day? And she said, tough day at work. And I asked what she does, and she said that she's a doctor. And we talked a little bit about that and how her day goes and stuff. And she said, and what do you do? And I said, no, this is my full time. I do this as my job full time. And she got curious, like you were saying, how does it work? Is it just the classes that you teach? And then like in 3 minutes, we went over very quickly what are the things, the aspects of being a full-time dancer. And hopefully we get the time to talk about all these things today. And for me, I was always a hustler in the sense that I have always been curious about ways in which I can work and have an income for myself that is enough for me to have savings, to have like a safety net. So even when I was a lawyer, I was still working on other things. So I drove Uber for a year. I had a barbecue catering service for like a year and a half or so. I did personal organizing. I would go to people's houses and organize their closets, their house, throw stuff away. So my Virgo side was really exercised back in the day. And switching from a full-time lawyer into full-time dancer was a process that happened not in a planned way and not in a way that I could visualize at first until when I saw I was in it. So I think that was actually an advantage because I did not have fears about it at first. I worked as a lawyer between 2014 and 2017. 2017, I quit and I came to the US. So I came to the West, and then without planning, I got the opportunity to work as a dancer. And then in the space of 9 months, I realized I was doing private lessons. I was traveling on the weekends. I was teaching during the week. So I realized, man, this is my profession now. So then is when it hit me. Like a year after I left Brazil, a year after I came to the US, that's when it hit me. Oh my God, now my money, my whole money, my entire money comes from dance. So that shift happened not before, not during, but a year after I started. So that is something that I think today was an advantage, because the anxieties that I feel today already in it were not there when I made a transition. So it was very smooth in a way.
And how long were you dancing when that happened?
I was dancing already for 11 years. So I started in 2006, that was 2017. So I had 11 years of dancing as my hobby for a long time. For a long time, 3 years or so, 4 years. I don't even know if that's considered a long time, but for this amount of time, I thought about becoming a teacher. However, I saw how my teachers back in the day in Brazil struggled to get things going, struggled to get their bills paid. Looking at that situation or those situations, I realized I'm going to have dance as my side thing. I'm going to have dance as my hobby, as my activity for leisure. So I put it away completely when I was in Brazil, the idea of working with dance. So this idea of working with dance only became something of a possibility after I moved away. Yeah.
And how about you, Adayl? How did that work?
Yeah, a really good thing that we can discuss later on this episode is the transition from having dance as a hobby to dance as a full-time teacher, how that shifts our brain for this kind of work, but we can discuss this more later. So for me, it was an interesting shift from full-time dance teacher to non-full-time dance teacher to full-time dance teacher again. In Brazil, I worked with a dance group in Araraquara called Grupo em Balanço, and we did some work mixing Brazilian social dances, bolero, forró, samba, into contemporary dances. And we're mainly a performance group, but we also teach regular classes, and most of my income came from that. It was my primary source of income. As Gui, I also dabble with a lot of other things. I worked for 2 years of my life as a kindergarten teacher for physical education, which is fantastic, teaching 3-4 years old how to roll. Great. After that, I worked for a travel agency, as Alisson mentioned before. I worked for Forma Turismo, and I was a tour guide for Disney World for 10 years of my life. And I was bringing kids from Brazil to Disney.
Wait. You were... I had no idea. You were a Disney tour guide for 10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Man, we gotta go to Disney together.
Yes, we should.
Tell me all the things.
Yeah,
oh my God,
I have
it's amazing.
all the inside knowledge.
Oh, wow. Sorry. Okay, move on. We will talk later.
No, it's all good. And it was great to have all this experience. And it's actually what made me want to come to the US. It was one of my life dreams after I started bringing kids to the US and experiencing the American life on that side of things. And then when I moved to the US, because I had a wife at that point, we saw that not necessarily the dance money would be enough at that point for us. So then I joined the retail side of things. I worked for Target for 5 years of my life. And last year I decided to really invest on the dance career and quit Target and become a full-time dance teacher. And now here we are.
What allowed you to feel confident and strong enough to make that switch last year?
I was going to say mainly you, probably, but confident with the teaching first, the teaching side of things, because I was teaching regular with District Zouk, and the DJ part of it came also on top. And I feel very comfortable and good with my craft, that I was getting hired to more events. I was getting hired to do more gigs, not only in the US, but around the world. And that gave me the confidence that could be enough income that I can survive on my own. And now here we.
So I think the pattern that we see here is that you got to make sure that you're always investing in multiple areas of the dance community, right? And as we spoke just before, and Gui was mentioning about multiple income streams. To me, this is the number one thing that I talk to everybody who wants to make that switch and perhaps become a part-time or full-time dancer. To make sure that while you're transitioning, you always have that safety net that is the full-time or part-time job that maybe is your previous career, until you make enough from dancing that you can actually support yourself and have some extra to put into savings, not just paying bills. Now, talking about myself, for me, everything started quite early in comparison, because I started dancing when I was about 12, 13 in terms of partner dancing. And I was doing dancing in Brazil as I was going to school. I was studying finance, accounting, management, business. And that's something that I really, really loved. But on a side note, my actual dream, since I was a child, was to be a civil engineer. Of course, it didn't happen. But I like to think that I've become sort of a dance engineer and body mechanics engineer in my own way, in terms of how I see the body, how I see structure, methods, and way that things go well together as a system. So when I was about 19, I moved to Australia, and the intention was only to go and learn English for 2.5 months with my cousin back then. And as it happened to Adayl and with Gui, because of the opportunity and because of necessity, I became a teacher. But it was something that I really never thought about doing, because of the same reasons that Gui mentioned before. The fact that, there's a lot of struggles, and back in Brazil, it just wasn't something that I felt like it could support the life that I wanted. And also, I didn't feel like there was a path for me to follow. Not at that point, at least. Maybe I was just too young to see. And then the rest is history. We're here. Now I'm in the US, but I lived in Australia for 12 years. I think the main thing that was difficult for me at the beginning was really that switch between having income from other jobs and then making the switch into dance. Because when I went to Australia, I went to study, and I was just there as an English student. And when you're an immigrant and you're a student, you just work in whatever you can outside of the school hours. So I had like 5 jobs: cleaning job, McDonald's job, housekeeping job, survey job, security job, you name it. Anything and under the sun that would give me 2 hours here, 3 hours there. On the weekends, daytime, one thing, evening, the other thing. But because I met the people in the dance community there, they started wanting to learn from me. So we began with a few private lessons. And then after a couple of months, we put a group together. And then after many more months, we started having multiple group classes. And as that income was increasing, then I was letting go of one of my 5 jobs. And then the other one, and then the other one, and then the other one. And it took me about 3 years to make the full transition. Because bear in mind, I was still a student. I didn't have a permanent visa or an artist visa or anything like that. That came 5 years later. So in my 3rd year, I became a full-time teacher And that was very scary because I was still having to pay like $300-$400 a week to study in order to stay in the country to get a visa. That was very scary, but luckily, like I said, in the 5th year, I was able to apply for a permanent residency and I was granted because of dance. So dance, again, saved my life and gave me the opportunity to be here and to be doing this. But I think another common thing between us here is that we had to leave the country in order to feel like we had that opportunity, which is quite sad, you know. But at the same time, it makes me happy because I feel like, while I'm sharing something that I love so much from my country, from my culture, with people all over the world. And these people are so passionate and so excited about learning things from my country and from my culture. So that to me is, you know, in the end of the day, what makes me happy and understand that this lifestyle is very difficult, but is very rewarding at the same time.
Yeah. I think in arts and sciences mainly in Brazil is difficult, tends to be difficult for you to make a living in the way that you think would be a comfortable one without so much hustle and struggle. So Brazil loses scientists, Brazil loses artists to anywhere abroad because abroad we will have an opportunity to make a living out of these fields. Né? So I heard from a couple of instructors that were teaching in Brazil before they left, and they said, man, when I realized that in 2 privates, we did the money of the entire month, of course, making the conversion, it was like so mind-blowing to them, that fact, that they realized what is this crazy thing that we are doing here, that in 2 privates, in 2 hours in the United States, they made the same amount of money that they were doing in a month worth of class for one group. Né? They had this one training group, and that one group in 1 month was giving them that much. So this realization that the way that your work is rewarded abroad is incredibly higher than the way that the work is rewarded in Brazil is, like you said, it's sad in a way, because then Brazil loses talent. Brazil loses the opportunity of learning from these people. This is something that I hear quite often when I'm back there. They feel this missing of these opportunities to learn from these people that they see on the YouTubes and the Instagrams, because they simply don't go to Brazil. And for us to go to Brazil now that we have our bills to be paid in USD, it becomes almost like, man, if I'm going to Brazil, I know I'm not going to make the same amount that I make when I'm charging in USD. So I'm going there to be with the crowd there, to dance with the people there. It's not for the finances. It's not for the finances. Né? And that's like a reality, just because we pay our life costs now is in a foreign currency now.
Exactly. Every time I go to Brazil now, I just go there and I stay with my family and I see a couple of friends, and maybe I'll go to a few socials, but I don't book weekenders or festivals or anything like that, because I have such a limited time with my family and with my friends there that I don't want to direct that time, that very limited time, to work. I already do that 99% of my year. So that 1 or maybe 5% of my year that I'm there, I just want to enjoy the family, enjoy the friends, enjoy the food, enjoy just the lifestyle, maybe going to a concert, maybe going to a party or anything that brings me back that feeling of why I love the country that I come from.
Same for me. Exactly the same for me. The month that I spend there, I only teach right now for a particular group of organizers, that we have like these shared values. And when I go and there is the opportunity, yes, there is some teaching there, but otherwise it's family time. And now I feel very curious now, how do you guys organize your finances as dancers? Yeah, like, is there a system? Is there a logic? How do you do this? How do you do this? Because I get very curious when sometimes I see a dancer in all these different countries, and I'm like, man, how are you paying this many flights? How are you paying these many accommodations? How are you doing it? So I think this curiosity that I have, and I am in the field, imagine those who are not. So how do you guys organize your finances?
For sure. And I think coming from what I heard through the grapevine from a very organized financial person, that is Gui, I think for me and between all of us, probably I'm the one making least amount of money on the dance side of things. It's very complicated, for sure. It's not an easy situation. And especially now moving to a different city and not knowing how the cost of living is going to be, how the cost of everything is going to be, how I'm going to transport myself from the house to the studio, how I'm going to eat, how I'm going to shop and everything. I think it makes things a little array. And as Gui mentioned also, thinking about festivals that I already planning to go as an attendee, not necessarily as an instructor, or as an instructor and DJ, and everything was booked based where I was before, and now I need to figure out logistics of how am I going to get myself from here to the other place. So everything has been very complicated lately. Luckily, I had some spare money for this move to happen, but I'm also very curious on now how you two organize your things.
But wait, how do you organize in the sense of like what streams do you have and how do you allocate things? Or right now you don't have any system, you just like money's coming in and I'm putting in whatever needs to be put. Okay.
Right now I'm just on
survival mode.
Every money that we can make, it goes to something that we need to spend money at. And especially because, again, moving to a different place, we don't know how things are going to be. So, for example, right now, I'm still looking at a more long-term house here in Portland. So I don't know how much rent's going to be. I don't know how much, again, transportation is going to be and stuff like that. Right now, totally survival mode. And figuring that out every single day of our life, which on the day of recording, the first of the month is tomorrow. So hustling is necessary.
Yes. Well, for me, it has changed because for me, this has been now almost 20 years of doing this. And I think 15, 16 of this being my full time. My first 5 years, as I mentioned before, everything that I could say yes to, every little dollar, coin, lesson, opportunity that I could say yes to, I would, because I was in survival mode. I had full-time school to pay, I had visas to pay, I had all my living costs to pay. And then once I got the visa, things got a little bit better because I didn't have to pay for school anymore. But at that point, I decided with my dance partner at the time that we wanted to make things grow and we wanted really to travel and to increase our visibility in our name, which comes with a lot of cost. Because how do you do that? You need to create opportunities for yourself. You need to train harder. You need to practice harder. Back then, Zouk shows was like a must for you to be hired at any event. And to be honest, back then, you had to have 2 shows per year. So 2 full choreographies to a crazy level, costumes, shoes. So I basically used to train 40 to 50 hours a week. So that's a full-time job, just in the studio, training, creating choreography and training, and making things new. So then again, I could be making money, but I wasn't because I was investing on growing my career, growing my visibility, and getting to the next level. And it wasn't until like maybe 9 years after I was already a full-time dancer, 9 or 10 years, which is when I began to have some savings or to earn enough and work less. So then work less, I mean unpaid work less and more paid work. So then I was not just paying my bills, but I was paying my bills and putting some aside. So for me, it took like 9 to 10 years. But that is because, for me, it's all or nothing. I go crazy. I just go really crazy. So for 5 years, I was just trying to stay in the country and be recognized as an artist and get the visa. And then for the next 4 to 5 years, I was just thinking, okay, now that I got this, how can I make sure that I create a legacy and I create a name that can sustain for the next 10, 15, 20 years? Spoiler alert, it's never going to stop. It's never going to end because you're always going to have to reinvent yourself and recreate something every 3 years. That's my recommendation. Every 3 years, you need to be bringing something else and something different because the community changes and the attention changes and the taste changes every 3 years. Well, at least that's what I've observed in my time in the community. So then after that, once again, I was in Melbourne for the next 3 years. Then I began doing Brazuki. I met Christina. And then I came to the US and let's reinvent again. Let's create something again. The pandemic happened and then ZoukNerds. But all in all, I think a big summary of how we're going to organize my income is to make sure that I have multiple income streams. Because I have too many passion projects like International Zouk Flash Mob Day, ZoukNerds, Brazuki, which are all huge things that make me zero money, I need to make sure that I schedule myself in the most financially efficient way. And I think I can do that nowadays because of how long I've been doing this for. So there's a huge difference between festivals, regular classes, private lessons, and weekenders, and how much you can earn in each one of them. And luckily for me, I love and absolutely love the ones that are, at least for me, more financially rewarding, which is like the regular community at home and the weekenders, because like in your regular classes at home, you don't have to travel, you don't have to fly, you don't have to take a taxi and spend a day at the airport. And then the weekender, you do have to fly and get a taxi and go to the airport. But at the same time, in a weekender, you can get 10 hours, 12 hours versus a festival that you're guaranteed maybe 4 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, depending on the event. And then you may be able to do some private lessons. But with that comes a lot of other social time and social dancing and competitions and things like that take a lot of time of your day. So you really need to be very smart about how you schedule your time to make sure that you can get to a point where you're earning the most for the least amount of hours for me, because I want to use the most amount of hours that I have in my week for my future. Most of my life, I'm working 2, 5, 10 years ahead. That's my full-time job. My full-time is my future. And then my part-time is my now. Anything that I'm doing now, it's going to come to fruition in a couple of years. So I think that's how I've managed to survive, really, not being here in terms of finance and planning, but being here in terms of teaching and being a person and a human.
Interesting. Yeah, super interesting. So you would say that you organize your finances having basically in mind having multiple streams of income. You make sure that you have multiple streams, and on top of that, most of your planning is related to future. So this stream, this comes in and you allocate that to these projects that you have for the next 5-10 years, something like that.
Exactly. So what I earned last year, I already knew I was going to earn the previous years. What I'm earning this year, I already knew that I was going to earn. So I know what I'm going to earn next year and the following year. Of course, there's a margin there. But I know because I know how many events I want to do. I know how many classes I want to teach per week. And I know when I put that into a spreadsheet, what's that going to bring me? There's a margin of up and down. And I think the only time that didn't work, it was because of the pandemic for obvious reasons. But at the same time, because I had multiple income streams or multiple projects and offerings and products, when the pandemic came, I wasn't out of work. Because that's the thing. You need to make sure that you're not put in a box. If you're put in a box, then you only serve for that purpose. But if you can bring multiple different products, you can relate to multiple different levels of the community. And you can network with people from almost anywhere in the world, then you have a higher chances of being successful in the dance community for a long time. If you park and if you cruise and if you just let things flow, it's a very, very dangerous place to be.
Oh boy, it is. I heard from other professionals back a couple years ago about their struggles of getting hired, of not getting hired. And one thing that I normally tell people that are coming into work with dance full time is that I say, we have in this profession an advantage that I don't think other professions might have, that we can create our own work. We can make it happen. We can come up with an idea and just throw it out there and see who's going to come with it. Most of the work that I did outside of teaching regular class at District Zouk, and even at District Zouk, is work that was created this intention of, let me put out something new, let's update, let's do something more. Because waiting, and that's something that I think in our profession is complicated. Very few are in this comfortable place that things will come to them, that they can wait and messages will come inviting them places. Very few of us are in that situation.
But at the same time, that fades away very quickly.
Exactly.
Because there's a bunch of people. Because there's a bunch of people hungry, excited, innovating, coming right behind you. So if you're not innovating yourself constantly, you're going to be overtaken very quickly.
Exactly. I think getting used to a situation in which you are sought out, that people seek you out, is very dangerous actually. Or being in a situation where you are in constant waiting to be invited, to be hired, that's also going to be very tricky because the market changes. So we have this ability to create our own work. And even if you have 5 people in class, we have 5 people in class, So I think that's something to share with everyone. I know not everybody has this by default or, by their own desires, this entrepreneurship vibe going. However, I think talking to us, message us, talk to us, because we can give some hints of inspiration, because you can create your own work. I think for me, in the way that I organize finances, it comes a lot from my upbringing, of course. I was raised by a Portuguese grandfather, and my grandparents in general, they were all very much into savings. You gotta have savings. So the way that I see my finances is that, let's say that I have $1,000 in my account. Once I reach $1,001, in my head, I just have $1. So that $1,000 become like something that don't exist. And once I reach $2,001, again, I just have $1. So I try not to go back. So this mindset, which is a little maddening at times, helped me a lot to create a safety net in terms of finances. And the way that I organize my finance is actually pretty simple. I just try to make more than I spend. So every month I try to finish in the blue. Yeah, of course, during the pandemic, it was not something that was possible, but I live a fairly frugal life. The only thing that we spend most of our money, and I think Alisson can relate to that, is with tech, with screens and cameras and microphones. I think most of our money goes to these things, man, and courses and stuff that we do for our own improvements. Because clothes and stuff like that, I have this shirt for 3 years now, so we don't spend so much money in these things. Making sure that there are multiple streams of income, and making sure that these streams of income, the ones that I can control, are providing some money in a constant basis on a consistent basis. For example, we don't have control over private lessons. They come and they go. So this one is more, it flows more. But the ones related to the regular classes, the weekend events, the online classes, these ones we can push a little bit more, we can reach out, we can talk to people, we can create new things, propose new things, create more content for the online part. These ones, I try to keep it rolling as much as I can. Before the pandemic, it was almost precisely 1/3 of my income was privates, 1/3 was regular classes, 1/3 was weekend events. Almost like precisely. During the pandemic, it shifted completely in the sense that private lessons became like 3/5 of the whole thing. And before I left the US, private lesson was almost the entire thing because I was leaving people who were taking a lot of private lessons. And now is a little bit more balanced again, with the private lessons actually being the lowest one. So it fluctuates a lot. And my planning is very similar to Alisson's. I think about the future a lot. I started investing my money in Brazil a couple of years before I left for the US. And I still have that there rolling. And here I have a savings account. And before I traveled for a year and a half, I made sure to save what I considered a comfortable amount of money so I could be a year with 1/3 of the income of the previous years. So like Alisson, everything is done pretty far in advance, the planning. And I think some people go a little crazy with that when they're not used to it. Because when we talk to them that we have for example, I know how 2027 might look like. And this is 3 years from now. And people that are not used to it, like, how do you, don't you go crazy about it? And I say, yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I go crazy. But I think for us, because we can get hurt, we can have problems on our back, on our feet, something can happen to us that we cannot work. For example, before I left in 2022, I was working so much that I got inflammation on my feet. Inflammation on the metatarsal, inflammation on the Achilles. So I needed to actually almost stop teaching for 2 months. And in these 2 months, no income, So that's the hard situation. So the way that I organize, simply try to not spend more than I make, which I think is a simple basic rule of any finances. Making sure there are multiple streams of income and that these multiple streams are actually generating income. So there needs to be some proactivity towards those multiple streams. And making sure there are plans for the future in terms of workshops, new projects for events, new projects for something that will bring some motion to your financial life. And I think this is pretty much how it has been going. And in 2022, I made at times triple of what I made as a lawyer dancing. Like if I converted the amounts, not converting reais to dollars, but let's say $3,000 are the same to 3,000 reais. Né? If I think like this, in just a rough just the number itself. In some months, because of how much I was working, I was making 3 times as I did when a lawyer. But but compensates that in the pandemic, at times we finished the months in negative. During the pandemic, I finished the month negative, like $2,000, $1,000 sometimes. But because we had that safety net, everything was fine.
But bringing all this that we talk a lot about our finances, our personal finances, the teacher side aspect of our business, how do you guys think this reflect on the attendee side of things, the student side of things, the business side of things for festivals and everything? How does this Zouk economy circles around, since we're talking a lot about finances on our teacher side of things?
I mean, it's a whole ecosystem, right? Somebody needs to have a job to pay for this, and then this person is selling this that needs to pay for that, and for this and for that. We're all part of the ecosystem. And I think this is worth an entire episode. So shall we go to the next episode and talk about this dance economics, dance addictions, the FOMOs, and how do people survive in this dance world?
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. I just have one last question, I think, on this end.
Yeah.
Which is, if you could give one very practical advice for those who are listening, they are teaching already, or they are thinking about becoming dance teachers, in terms of finances, what would be a practical advice you would give someone who wants to survive in this dance world?
I will go for 2, actually. One on the artistic side. On the artistic side, make sure that you're not following the crowd. Make sure that you look at the market, you look at the industry, and you may be distracted and attracted to follow and do everything that everybody's doing. But then you're just, in my opinion, not investing on what could be something even bigger. Okay, and understand if what you want actually aligns with what the market is mostly doing. That has worked for me. On the financial side, make sure that you're always planning ahead and thinking ahead of how what you do today brings an income in the future. Instead of just like, I'm training, I'm doing a choreography, I'm traveling, and I'm going to events, going to festivals. Great. But how is that going to affect your financial future? Is that going to bring the return that is reasonable with the investment that you're making now? Like Gui said, we spend money on tech. And that is because I know that this is an investment on future projects that I have for the next year or 2 or 3. So I'm not buying a computer or a light because I think it's cool, but it's because I know that there are at least 3-5 projects that I can work with this and that will generate a return for me. So financially building multiple safety nets and making sure that you're only spending the money, not all, we got to have fun, but most of the money in things that are investments for skills or opportunities for your future.
Nice. And do you have anything for our peoples?
I think diversifying your line of work as much as you can, as same as Alisson said, sometimes just going with the crowd is not necessarily what is gonna make the best decision. It might look like the shinier decision, but not necessarily the best decision for what you want. And if that's what you really want to do with your life, it's something that we need to actually think, because it's not easy. As we mentioned before, as soon as you make this your hustle, sometimes the passion just goes away.
Yep.
So we need to understand that if that's really something that you want to do, you need to dive in head on and invest on it and actually make an effort to make this happen.
And last but not least, don't make the same mistake as I have made many times of my life, which is to not ask for help and mentorship. Look up to somebody who does what you want to do, who knows how to get to where you want to be, and reach out. A lot of the times, they are more than happy to share any information that you might want. So I was lucky to have people who did that for me, but I was not proactive enough to seek out. It was mostly when I was like at the bottom where people go like, hey, Alisson, come on, let's do something. But I should and I could have asked for mentorship and help before I got there. So make sure that you do that. It's very, very important. And we're all in this together as a dance community. We just want to see everybody being successful.
Yeah, I agree so much with that, man. Having I'm gonna quote unquote, having a master, having like your teacher, your guru, or someone that you can go for advice makes such a difference, you know. And I would say to the peoples, I would second everything that everyone says, that Alisson said, that you said. I see a lot of things in terms of longevity. So in longevity terms, what Alisson brought is gold, you know. And I would add to that the fact that you might already know, or you will get to know, what is it that in this dance world really moves you. It really brings you so much joy of doing and helps the passions to stay alive, helps the flame to keep burning. I realized that what moves me is teaching local classes, regular classes. It moves me a lot. It brings me passion. My passion is always alive and I love it so much. So the investment that I made in my time to perfect my craft is made to perfect the craft of teaching the local classes, to make them even better. So if you like teaching at festivals, if teaching at festivals is your joy, and you want to keep your relevance, you want to keep being invited, there is definitely a craft within the craft associated with teaching in these circumstances. So working on it to make it even better, so your passion is alive and people can see it. People see it, they are attracted to it, so they will come to you and you stay there. So I think that would be my recommendation on top of what everybody said there. And have savings. Have a safety net. Like in investments, we have this idea of emergency funds. So have your emergency funds. Calculate 3-6 months, and if you're like me, a whole year of monthly expenses, and save it and have it there. Because if anything happens, you can hold yourself for a long time. Yeah, just that in mind.
It's interesting because as you were saying this, I just remembered that I have 3 bank accounts. So one is like the main bank account, the other one is flexible, the other one is do not touch. So I named them that way. So basically every income, monthly income, I split them into flexible and do not touch. And the flexible is like, maybe I didn't have a good month, I can pull it out of there. But if that flexible is running out, I have to stop everything because the do not touch, I do not touch. I cannot get into that unless it's a family or medical emergency or something like that.
See, Alisson, this is the thing I wanted to know when I asked how do you organize your finances.
I forgot. It's just so normal to me.
These are the practicalities that I think people would love to know more, you know? So you have a do not touch, you know? I have my do not touch within my one, which is that, like I said, after 1,000, that 1,000 is do not touch. But I like this idea of having a do not touch account.
They are separate accounts because I don't want to see that as a balance. And sometimes I look at my do not touch account and I'm like, oh, hi, hello. Because I didn't see it for a long time, you know, so it's good. So you just push it there, but don't look at the balance. It's not in my phone. I just don't know it until I absolutely, maybe for an emergency, I have to. I forgot about that.
Beautiful. I think that's super valuable information. Amazing. Thank you for sharing.
All right, guys, let's go to talk about the dance economics and dance addiction in our next episode. So come with us, guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Beijos, abraços.